hopefully you all are looking at a screen with a couple of pictures there. It says Fuel Treatment Effectiveness Monitoring. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we got you, Frankie.
All right, excellent. So yeah, Jen, thanks for hosting this and getting us kicked off, and thanks to everybody for joining in. Good to see so many folks jumping into this. So again, my name is Frankie Romero. I'm with the Washington Office Fire and Aviation Management, Fire Use and Fuel Spec Program Manager. And then joining me as well is Caroline Noble, and Caroline works in the Wildland Fire RD&A and one of the technical specialists and lead developers of FTEM, as well as Fuel Treatment Effectiveness Monitoring. So she's going to be taking you on a tour a little bit later. And then Tessa Nicolay, for those of you that have been into a detail, you know how that works. Tessa's detailed behind Jim Manakis, who's usually my co-conspirator with FTEM. And so as a result, Tessa's been thrown into the fire and diving into FTEM as well. So thanks to everybody for joining us there. So I'm going to try to get us kicked off here. So I'm starting off here with an assumption that in our audience we've got folks that are quite familiar with Fuel Treatment Effectiveness program and module within FTEM, and other folks that have maybe not even heard of it. So we're going to just start from the beginning here. So the module within the FTEM environment, we'll start there. This is an online database, the FTEM database, and it consists of entries where each entry we have evaluated an interaction between a wildfire and one of our hazardous fuel treatments out on the landscape. This program is national in scope. It's wall to wall for all Forest Service areas. It's also interagency in scope. So the U.S. Forest Service participates in this program along with the DOI bureaus, BLM, Park Service, BIA, and Fish and Wildlife Service. So with those entries, it allows us to create simple reports where we can tally up information, and it also acts. The database also acts as a collection point or data warehouse archive, if you will, for optional reports. And so the basics. The basic entry is only 9 data elements for the Forest Service. That's the minimum required, but there is lots of capability to store optional reports, photos, data, other information that local unit might have collected on one of these interactions as well. So that capability is available, even though it's not required in all instances. So that's essentially what the module within FTDIS is. So just to give folks a little bit of background, so why did we even create the Fuel Treatment Effectiveness Monitoring program? It really boils down to our ability to verify, both to ourselves internally as well as externally, that our hazardous fuels treatment investments are providing the intended value. Our ability to answer questions like, are we producing the results that we thought we would with these hazardous fuels investments? And when it really comes down to is, the hazardous fuels program within each of our agencies and bureaus is not inexpensive. There's significant taxpayer dollars involved here. And so we have to be able to answer the question, is this a wise investment? So we realized this really on the heels of the National Fire Plan. So, the hazardous fuels program in the federal agencies really has its start with the National Fire Plan, which started in the year 2000. And so, that was the first time we really started making significant investments and started reporting significant accomplishments to to getting hazardous fuels treatments in on the landscape. But once we got into it about 5 years, by about 2006, there's new questions starting to emerge. By this time, we had invested close to $3 billion between the DOI and Forest Service, and we had been reporting millions and millions of acres treated. And so as this information is coming in, people are asking, well, what effect is this having? Is this having the intended effect? Are wildfires encountering these or not? And when they do, what happens? Do they help a little? Do they help a lot? Do they help not at all? Do they help all the time? And we did not have the information really to answer those kinds of questions. So that was really the impetus for why we started the FTEM program. So like I said earlier, when you put an entry into the database, there's only 9 required elements. 2 of those 9 are these 2 questions. And these are really the key questions of the behind FTEM. When a wildfire encounters a fuel treatment area, did the fire behavior change? Yes or no? Pretty simple there. And when a wildfire encounters a fuel treatment area, did the treatment contribute to the control or management of that fire? Was it useful? Yes or no? And really these 2 questions are the basis for FTEM. Super simplistic. Many folks would say overly simplistic, but we did approach this from the standpoint of yes, more information is useful, but what's the bare minimum we need to answer the questions that we're getting? And when we looked at that critically, it really boiled down to these 2 things. And so real quickly, wanted to go over what the Fuel Treatment Effectiveness Monitoring Program is not. So a lot of folks will make assumptions when they hear Fuel Treatment Effectiveness Monitoring. That means a lot of different things to different people. So I want to be clear that this effort is not intended to evaluate fuel treatments that have not encountered a wildfire. It's only for evaluating those fuel treatments that have actually come in contact with wildfire. It's not fire effects monitoring. It does not entail a lot of detailed analysis about what the actual fire effects were, scorch height and char heights and those kinds of things. It's also not intended to be research. We're not gathering data for research purposes. The information we are gathering here is really strictly for managerial purposes. It might lead to research questions, certainly, but its intent for why we're collecting it is not for research. And there's no economics involved, so we are not collecting information about dollar amounts and return on investment in an economic sense. So just wanted to make sure that we understand what FTEM can and cannot really address. So wanted to make sure folks were aware, largely a Forest Service audience here, make sure folks were aware where to find applicable policy within Forest Service manual direction. So in the 5140 manual area under section 5144, you will find the applicable policy direction regarding FTEM. And in there, if you look that one up, essentially what it boils down to is we do require that anytime a wildfire encounters a hazardous fuel treatment area, that an entry be entered into the database. And there's some time parameters there. So any treatment that was completed within the last 10 years, in most regions, the southern region, because of their situation there, we've got a 3-year stipulation for them. And so, that's required anytime it falls within those parameters. We are seeing most folks that are in the habit of collecting these, they're definitely adding documentation for older treatments, even if they're beyond this, because a lot of times we're still seeing that there is some notable or mentionable impacts of even those older treatments. So, and so when we say treatments, what do we mean? If we claimed accomplishments in our facts database for Forest Service folks, then that is what we're saying is a treatment. And you'll see once you see the demonstration of the module, we're pulling information directly out of facts to help us identify where those treatments are. We require that the reports be submitted within 90 days of control of the fire. That's certainly ideal, and I would definitely say, we see there's a lot of demand for the information, and so the better we can do at adhering to that, within 3 months after the fire's been controlled, the better off we are. We know there's exceptional events out there. Sometimes it's just physically not possible to do it. And there's definitely some fires that are, they're so large and it's such a workload that we realize this isn't going to be 100%, but definitely want to encourage trying to stick to that 90-day time frame if at all possible. And so wanted to touch a little bit on, how does this connect with the work that we're doing in the field and out on the districts, out on forest. We have seen since we started this program and were able to deliver some results from it. Every Forest Service chief since about 2011 with Chief Tidwell, almost every time they are reporting to Congress, they are providing a synopsis of the field treatment effectiveness monitoring information, and it has become part of the regular menu for any communication that we're having between our agency department and on up to Congress. So it's definitely now turned into something that is not only seen valuable information, but it's almost expected now of part of our reporting on how our programs are going, particularly the hazardous fuels treatment program. So there's a direct link between the data that we're providing and collecting and the trust and support that Congress and the administration and others have for their hazardous fuels program. So what we've been able to do since we started collecting FTEM information is we are able to state when we talk about our hazardous fuels program that our treatments are being tested by wildfire regularly. We know that they're encountering wildfire hundreds of times, and now in the last several years, actually thousands of times each year. And we know that they are largely effective. From this reporting, they are being reported as having changed the behavior and or helped in the control or management of the fire roughly 85% of the time. So 85%, that's a pretty strong estimate of these things are doing what we intended them to do. Besides those two specific questions that we're able to address with the data being collected, we're also seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence from the reports that are coming in that allow us to talk about some of these benefits, like improved initial attack success, better success in protecting homes and communities, reducing damage and improving forest resilience, and giving us more options as fire managers and responders to address these fires. So those are kind of added benefits of the data we've been collecting. So how does that look in terms of when Congress supports something? The way they express that support is usually through appropriations, and so this is just a graph of here's how the U.S. Forest Service and DOI combined have been funded for hazardous fuels work. And so you can see 2000 National Fire Plan kicked in. There's the big jump. The first 5 years we were just doing work but we didn't really know what was going on with wildfires encountering these. So in 2006, that's when we started paying attention and developing the FTEM idea. And so, you know, you can see, and we made it required for Forest Service in 2011. DOI made it required 2012. And you know, this kind of demonstrates that yeah, things are going to ebb and flow a little bit, but overall, the information that we're gathering is allowing us to tell a really good story. So you know, that in fact is the power of the FTEM program. And you know, a couple of other things that have spun off of it is we also are learning a few lessons. So there's some anecdotal stuff that's been coming through. You know, here's one from Utah that you can see where we completed our work over on the left. Wildfire came through and the results were favorable. Where we had not completed any work at all, the results of the wildfire coming through were not favorable. And you can also see where we had incomplete work. The thinning had been done, but the piles had not been disposed of yet. When the wildfire came through, it was also not favorable. So we're, you know, these kinds of evidence kind of give us that little spark that says, oh man, we really got to pay attention to, you know, how we're disposing of the residue. We're also learning some other stuff. This one came in about mastication, and you know, in this one, although the rate of spread was lowered as designed, and it did work as designed to allow firefighters to stop the fire progression, still the downside was there was still residue fuels on site that created enough heat that it did damage the residual canopies, so or trees. So you know, these are the kinds of things that are kind of spilling in where we're kind of learning as we go, and so it's definitely a added benefit. So I'm going to turn it over to Caroline right now, who's going to take you all through a little tour. So what I'm going to leave you with is, you know, when it comes to fuel treatment effectiveness monitoring, we really need as many folks as we can to be paying attention, to be accessing the FTEM module within FTDIS and monitoring when you have wildfire and fuel treatment interactions, getting those reports into FTDIS within that 90-day time period whenever possible. And then most importantly, you know, when you gather this information and you learn this story, you have the power to then convey that story to other people and inform others that, hey, this is happening and we believe it's good work. So whenever possible, take that information that you gathered from this and disseminate your story. And when you get a chance, you know, these are a few little snippets and videos that folks have developed, and I definitely encourage folks to consider doing this as well. So that's what I had for just an intro and familiarization with why we even have FTEM. So Caroline, I'm gonna hand it over to you to take us through the tour.
Thank you. Thank you, Frankie. Thank you. Ooh, I'm echoing. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep, I got you loud and clear. Thumbs up from the crowd. Thank you.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Carolyn.
Okay, thanks. I think I just muted myself by accident. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was not aware of this fuels community of practice, and I was just emailing with Jen. I think it's great. And as an application team, audiences like these are ideal for us to be interacting directly with field folks and folks who potentially are users of the FTDIS and FTEM applications. So we're thankful to be made aware of this and thankful for the opportunity. With that, I was going to go ahead and jump right into a few things about FTEM. Not burn a lot of time, kind of hit the middle mark between those who have not used it and those who have have the responsibility of entering data and take any questions, leave plenty of time for questions. So as just to start off, as Frankie pointed out, FTEM came about. This version of it became the official repository for entering FTEM data in 2018. Prior to that, there was data collection stored in an Access database that the Forest Service used. And the idea being that we could make it spatial in nature rather than just tabular data. So users can see the relationship between the treatments and the wildfires spatially, and that will help with the monitoring effort. So it's been 3 or 4 years now in data collection. You do access FTEM through the FTDIS application. For those of you that maybe haven't ever accessed the system, first you have to get an FTDIS account, and then FTEM is on the banner at the top, and clicking that will take you right to FTEM. FTDIS accounts are open to everyone, and with FTEM, if you use your email ending in .gov, you'll automatically be accepted into the system as in a role called viewer. And if you need a role higher than that, where you're going to enter data, that's called the editor role. I do want to show that we have a pretty robust help system within the application. Just going to the section on roles, if you hit help in FTDIS, you can find your way around, but you've got a left-hand panel that shows the various places, and there's a whole section on FTEM. It has cascading opening up, and you can find a section on roles and permissions. There's 5 different roles. FTEM Viewer is actually for non-agency folks that just want to get in and look, and they have very limited access. These X's show what functionality is available in those roles. So at Agency Viewer with your .gov email, you're coming in, being able to look at fires and treatments and generate reports. The editors are the ones that enter data, and the admins, typically regional folks in the Forest Service, are the ones that manage the editor role, approving, dealing with people changing positions, et cetera. And then FTE admin is the highest role, which is really the leadership for the agency and FTEM and the development team. So with that, when you get to the landing page of FTEM, there's some very useful information here. There's access to the 2 main modules, the monitoring and the reports, as well as account management. If you go to account management, just to show you guys, it's pretty simple. Oops, I'm not supposed to show my security, but you have your profile. And I'm pointing this out because a lot of folks that haven't been in the system in a while still have their @fs.fed.us emails. So next time you get into FTDIS, if you can go to your profile and change it to @usda.gov, that would be great. And then here's your roles, and I'm going to show you a viewer role first. You can request additional roles with this Add FTEM Roles button, and click what you would like to request, and that will go to those agency administrators to approve or not approve. You enter your justification, and that's a simple way to get additional roles. And preferences just has to do with some setting preferences for location and map. Let's see. Oh, go back here. Also on the landing page, you've got a link to the help right here. The agency leads, in the Forest Service case, primarily Jim Manakis, also Frankie and Tessa in her detail, a link to Forest Service policy. And then this YouTube playlist has got a really great set of existing, the kickoff webinar we did for the Forest Service on FTEM, a variety of different things. They're range in duration from like 5 minutes to an hour, but worth time to go look at the FTEM playlist. And then, of course, back to FTDIS. So when you enter into the application and monitoring, I wanted to show you the viewer role first. It's a very simple menu where it lists my agency up here. In this case, I'm Forest Service, and only Forest Service. We do allow for interagency in those areas that do some combined work. And then you have a toggle for year. So for example, in 2022, we've already got a few fires in here. This map is interactive with this table view. And as you pan and zoom, the list will update. So these current 5 fires or so, primarily in the Southeast region, are visible to you. You can click on the map to get more information, or you can click zoom to and come in to get a little bit closer look at the fire. The circle represents a buffer in the cases where we only have a point for a wildfire location. It's buffered. In most cases, a polygon will eventually come in. And when that polygon comes in, it will update which treatments that it detects as potentially interacting. So as far as this color coding that you see, the color coding for the wildfires is listed here. Green would be the monitoring is already completed, yellow monitoring in progress, red is check for interactions. So check for interactions means that with the system information we have for the wildfire and for treatments, it's detecting that there's a likely interaction. And in this case, of example, this pelt fire, it's detecting up to 16 interactions have occurred with that fire. So again, this map is dynamic. You zoom out to your area of interest and you see a list of fires and their statuses. So all the fires in gray are fires that an interaction is not detected. There does not appear to be any treatment near it. It's not to say that there for sure isn't, but the system has no data indicating an interaction between a treatment and a wildfire. Once you select a wildfire, the next tab in this case is treatments. And for the viewer role, this is as far as you get, but you can at least toggle on and off and see where these treatments are. And you can zoom to them. So in this case, this blue is the wildfire origin. The aqua circle is the buffer put around it based on the acreage. And the hashed marks are these different treatments I'm toggling on and off to see the interaction. So that's a pretty straightforward view of what, say, an agency administrator, anybody with a .gov email would see in the system. I'm going to move over to a tab where my role is a little bit more advanced. And you'll see now that there's 4 tabs across the top. So this is for people with the editor role. After you select your fire and go to that treatments tab, and again, I can say zoom to one of these treatments. You have available to you the next tab, which is monitoring, where you begin to enter data about the interaction between the wildfire and that treatment. And then finally, a completion tab, where once all the treatments have been monitored, you can submit it for completion. So it's a left to right process across the panel. I do want to show a few things about this page that are lesser recognized. One being these little arrows at the top. That goes from split screen to full mode. So one handy thing can be go to full table mode. And when you do that, for example, for the treatment list for the pelt fire, now I have this right-hand panel available to me that gives just a little bit more information about the attributes that we have associated with that treatment. So you get a little bit more of the data that came in from facts associated with that treatment. You can also filter here by, if you just want to look at the treatments that were fire versus the treatments that were mechanical. And an important thing about this treatment list, this is a sort of a common issue that we see with the monitoring. If I go back to the pelt, so there's 16 potential interactions, right? If I were to turn on all the treatments associated with the pelt fire, you can do that by just say select all, and it's going to put into hash marks every treatment that it's identifying as potentially interacting. The thing I want to emphasize is this is potential interaction. If we were doing this all automated, there would be no reporting required of the people in the field, but obviously computers make mistakes, data is wrong, and there's a lot more information to be gleaned than just the interaction. So this treatments tab, we used to use the analogy of like your Amazon shopping cart. And it's where you affirm as the field person knowledgeable about this fire and these treatments that this there was indeed an interaction. So the location's in the right place. Yes, compartment 129, prescribed fire, is indeed the treatment that did interact. If it did not, you have the ability to remove a treatment right here. Similarly, you can add treatments. You can do this on the map and with these buttons. You can put an additional buffer around. It's doing its default buffer and see if there's more treatments that maybe were not detected, and you can add them. So similar to like the question I saw in the chat already about the duration of treatment effectiveness. If there's some older fires that really were not perceived locally to have any impact on the wildfire, you can just remove them. If they're greater than the 3 years in the Southeast, those are policy things that you'll have to verify, but the ability to add and remove does exist. This is just what, as much as we can take the automation for the users to do the final touches. So
Hey,
once
Carolyn?
you select it, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a point here. When you're selecting remove treatments, it doesn't remove the treatment from the facts database. It's just
Correct.
removing it from the particular interaction recognition of the system. So that people get a little nervous when we say remove treatments. It's not taking it out of the system for record. It's just taking it out of your assessment for effectiveness monitoring.
Thanks, Jen. Great point. Yeah, and you're not even taking it out of the FTEM system. You could add it right back if you decide that that was a mistake. So it's certainly not a fatal error. You would just go to the add treatments and find it and put it right back in. Great point. Any other questions before I keep going? Okay. Once you've got your list of treatments, the next step is to select the treatment and go to the monitoring tab and select it to enter data. And this is where the list of required and optional questions that Frankie alluded to exists. So for the required questions, they're listed at the top. They have asterisks next to them. A lot of them are pick list. So the user can go through, use the pick list. This treatment acres burned by wildfire is often automatically populated. In the case of this example right now with a point, it can't be calculated because we don't have a polygon, so it can be estimated. And sometimes the polygons will come in later. In this case, for these 2022 fires, I suspect that's the case. So sometimes it's a little bit advantageous to wait for that polygon commit to come in, or to load the polygon yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about data sources. Then the date that the wildfire interacted with the treatment, the time, which is an optional field, and the other monitoring questions. So you can begin to enter the required questions. Again, all the optional questions are below as well, that there's some really important things about how the interaction impacted management type things. So you can partially populate this or do the whole thing and then save your data. And you'll see that now that treatment has turned to yellow. So that means monitoring is in progress for that treatment. Back to these legends, we have the legend both at the wildfire level and at the treatment level. So now we have a treatment monitoring yellow in progress. If I go back to the wildfire tab, you'll also see that the pelt fire itself is in progress because we've monitored one treatment. So there's a lot of navigating back and forth between tab 2 and tab 3 to enter the monitoring data, especially for some of the larger fires. And in a few minutes here, I'll show you some work we're doing to make that a little bit easier and less user intensive in terms of button clicking to enter the data. And then the final step after the monitoring is completed and all the treatments have been turned green, this is another place that trips people up. Once all the treatments have been monitored, the fire itself will not be considered completed for monitoring until this final step of going to the complete tab. It will show, in this case, if there's still 15 is completed, at which point this button becomes available and say complete wildfire monitoring. It says for USFS because many of the larger fires, obviously there's multiple agencies involved, and each agency at this point completes its monitoring independently. So a Park Service person would get the Pelt Fire and the 3 interactions associated. If they were Park Service treatments, they would monitor their 3 treatments and complete their portion of the Pelt Fire. I have an example pulled up of that, but that's how that works. So that's monitoring in a nutshell, what this screen looks like when you're in the monitoring section. I want to go and look at reports a little bit. This page gives you access to the 6 or 7 reports that exist through this drop-down menu. The wildfire report, I'm not going to pull one up, but that's for an individual fire where the monitoring has been completed, and it will give you a summary of all the data that was entered and a small map image. The agency summary, you can pick your agency, and it will go ahead and generate a summary for, I just did Forest Service, checks to see if there's data. Now in this case, I'm probably pulling, this one goes, all Forest Service. So it shows the number of yes and no responses by year to the various questions, and then summarize them in terms of percentages and list the total records. So that's the agency summary, which is done by year. Similarly, the region and state summaries do the same kind of thing. For example, I pick a state and I pick California, pick 2021. It's going through and this is all pretty fast, as you can see. I'm doing this in real time. It separates it out by agency. So here's Forest Service in California, and it's summarizing the monitoring data that is entered into the system thus far. So these are useful to click around and check to see what's of interest for you at a local level, especially if you're in a management position. A couple more here, the current wildfire status summary. This is one that the managers like to look at more. Could be, considered the summary of shame, because this is where you're competing with the other agencies and bureaus to see how you're doing in terms of getting your FTEM work done. So for example, looking at 2021, the Forest Service so far is at 41% completion. So 414 wildfires have been completed, 68 in progress, 534 remain in that red or check status, and for a total of 41%. And this system is different than perhaps some in that it stays open year after year, so users can still go back and conduct monitoring for as long as the system has existed. So back the first year, 2018, the Forest Service is up to 59%. It's not too late to improve your statistics for these previous years and get that data in there. And I think Frankie gave some compelling arguments as to why that's so important and how powerful that data can be at leadership levels. So a little bit of an appeal. And 2 more reports are the completed wildfire monitoring data summary and the current treatment status summary. And those are going to download spreadsheets or CSV format. For example, if I did the Forest Service, and then you have these cascading filters where you can select just your region and just your unit and your year range if you choose to. So and they're quick too, but I have one just pulled up that I pulled earlier just to show, and you'll get this sort of spreadsheet format. In this case, this was 2022, so this is all the wildfires for the Forest Service to date yet, and it lists, they're all in the treatment status of not monitored yet. It's listing all the treatments that need to be monitored and the names of the wildfires. So I think there was a question from Jason on that where it wasn't showing the in progress status. And so Jason, one thing to remember is this is the treatment status. We're actually not showing the monitoring for the wildfire, the monitoring status for the wildfire. So all the treatments are not started. And if the treatment itself is in progress, it should pull the in progress status of the treatment. But I could see how that would be a little confusing. This other report is indeed for completed wildfires. So if that report is pulled, it will just pull a similar data set for all those that are in the completed status. So any questions on reporting or what's in the reporting tab there? A couple more things. The help content does have a link to the, the policy. I just wanted to show that if you won't take much time looking in the application, here's the agency specific policies. It could take you there. The other common thing that comes up, besides I showed you the shopping cart where people tend to monitor all the treatments instead of removing the ones that didn't interact. Another common, the most common question, in fact, is probably where did the data for the wildfires and the treatments come from? And the short answer is just these come from the systems of record. So if you see a problem with data for a wildfire or data for a treatment, FTDIS cannot fix it. You could submit a ticket and we could help you troubleshoot it, but we're going to most likely send you back to the system of record with questions you have about it. So the points come from IRWIN and the polygons come from the National Incident Feature Service. So in some cases, those polygons are loaded by incident management teams and updated daily in the incidents of large fires. Smaller local unit fires, folks are doing their own GIS. They're the ones that are going to be uploading it into the National Incident Feature Service. So you have more local access to whoever's managing the polygon information for that. And again, the system does update nightly for pulling both the polygon or the treatment data and the wildfire data. So if you know of fires continuing to grow, you can go in and begin monitoring early on, but sometimes it's in your better interest to just wait and until that fire size is somewhat stabilized and let the system do the work for you in terms of locating the interactions. So here's the page about wildfire data sources, and then here's the page about treatment data sources. So for Forest Service, it comes from FACTS. Again, Frankie mentioned that there's it's interagency, so there's a middle step where FACTS and NIFPOR's data are put through this treatment integration service. They're put into a common attribution because there's different names for different things in those two systems. And then we pull that commonly attributed data on into FTEM. And if you scroll through this information, I'm not going to try and get too deeply into it, but the FACTS data is key point 3 and key point 6 only that comes in. And then we do have a record of the old point data from FACTS, but the FACTS now is polygon only, I believe, and has been for quite some time. So that's a quick snapshot of the treatment data sources. Any questions on that? The last thing I want to show you guys is the work we're doing on the bulk editing or spreadsheet type format for data entry. Have any questions here? Okay. Let's see. Oh, I got to log in again. So here you'll notice that the top of the screen is green instead of blue. So you are now in the exciting test environment for FTDIS where the development is happening almost live. Hang on, I don't want to mess up my password here. So again, you log into FTDIS and proceed to FTEM. Actually, you guys might have even noticed, I think my development or my production environment screen looks a little different than yours too. So we're working on something that's going to make life easier for that data entry, especially in cases of large fires. For example, I was just chatting with a woman yesterday who's doing the work for the bootleg fire in Oregon, and there's 842 interactions. That's a lot of clicking to enter that data. So we're implementing this ability to download the data in a spreadsheet format and do the data entry into a spreadsheet and then upload it back in. This work is in process, so you'll notice The download button is not currently available. If I select a fire, the download button becomes available for me to select. And then I select download. I already downloaded one. It's fast, but I just want to keep it simple. So if I was looking nationwide and I selected like all the fires that currently are down here in the Southeast. Now you'll notice that the gray fires, so fires with nothing, no interactions detected, do not have a checkbox because there would be no data to enter. If you found an interaction and added it, that would turn red and it would be available to download. So this is where your responsibility in the shopping cart to make sure that the fires and the treatments are detected properly in the system. And then the green fires that are completed, there's no data to enter, so that also does not have a checkbox. If there's ever a mistake made and you want to amend or change the data that was entered on a completed wildfire, if you go to the completion tab, I have to select that fire. For a completed fire, you have this amend button. And if you click that, it'll turn it back into in progress. It'll be yellow again. So in the case of this fire, then it would get a checkbox if you wanted to, you'd be able to download it. So when you download one of these, or you can one or many, you can do as many as you want. You get a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet will have two tabs. It has a README tab, which is basically instructions. And then the second tab is the treatment data tab. It's excitingly color-coded. Trying to keep it simple for folks. So red means stop, yellow means proceed with caution, green means go. So green go is where the data entry would occur. In this case, the one I downloaded has some things partially entered. So what's here matches exactly the data entry questions that are in the user interface now. So the interaction details, you can just populate these, populate the acres burned, populate the date. We do have some validation going into it. So if I put an incorrect date, it will say, nope, it has to be after the discovery date, time of interaction, etc. with these pick lists for yes or no. So the idea being that for any given fire, you see in the red, the do not touch data. The fire name is listed over here in this column. And then the treatment name is over here. So this Muck Farm fire, or the Muck Farm 3 fire, a couple of them have these treatments interacting with them. You've got some data that comes from the system of record, acres, completion date, type. So that orients the user to which treatment it is that they're monitoring on and which fire. And you can widen and shrink those columns. So you can just do your entry and data entry this way. You can do some copying and pasting. Like I said, we're still developing this, add some comment fields. So you populate the spreadsheet instead of doing the click method in the monitoring tab. And then you would select upload and go find your spreadsheet and bring it in. I can't do it yet because we're still building that, and that's as far as it exists right now. But when that data comes in, it will update the status of the treatments and the wildfires. It will incorporate that data and say, okay, great, now you've completed that treatment or that wildfire. Thank you for all your hard work. So we're really hopeful that that will be helpful for both those large fires with hundreds of interactions, as well as the other aspect to this, and again, we haven't built it yet, but we're working on it, is there's going to be a report. So similar to what I showed, if you'd rather download not so much at the fire level, but say a management unit level, like I want all the monitoring that needs to be done on my forest or my district, we'll implement the same type of filtering as is currently in this current treatment status report. Oops, I can say I work for the Forest Service, I'm in Region 8, and I just want to get my units, and it will be the current, it'll be like data entry spreadsheet or something, and you'll check, and then you'll download that same color-coded spreadsheet. So instead of having to select from the map, oops, where'd that go? With checkboxes, which can be laborious depending on the size of the area you're looking at. You can do it by unit, management unit, or administrative unit if you're looking for your whole region or whatever. That's in our testing phase, we're looking for feedback on that and how this workflow would actually be accomplished in the field by folks like you. So if you have ideas and thoughts on this, there are actually a couple of the beta testers, I believe, in attendance today. And I don't know if they want to acknowledge themselves, but you could also reach out to me directly, and we're welcoming input at this time on that. I think I'll stop there because there's only a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we leave time for questions.
Good deal. Thank you, Carolyn. So it's question and answer time, guys. This is for you. So if you haven't had a chance to load something in the chat box, I think Caroline has addressed all of those so far. What else is out there, and or what about FTEM would you like to either sound off or get an answer for? Jason, go ahead.
Hey, Jen. So, hey, I'd just like to point out too that I from some practical experience that I've seen here in Region 3 is that you know, folks will see something show up in FTEM and they'll say, hey, that's not my fire, that was a state fire, but it interacted potentially with their treatment. So just an FYI that, you know, technically we should report on that as, you know, was our treatment successful in helping to stop a non-Forest Service fire.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jason, especially in the era we are now with cross-boundary and interagency response. That's going to be important to demonstrating we're stopping stuff coming off or coming onto our land. Brian, what do you got?
Hey, similar to those lines, and I know not an unknown issue and certainly a conversation way above my head, but you know, you look at the infrastructure bill and tied with the cross-boundary work that we're already doing, you know, potentially tens or hundreds of millions of dollars being funneled directly to the states to do risk mitigation work. And currently, since those treatments aren't part of any of our spatial databases, I assume they're all missed through FTEM, but is there any discussion or proposals to try and incorporate some of those non-federal treatments into the database and enroll the states into it? If this is such an important and powerful tool when we talk to Congress and we're funneling more and more money directly to the states, it just seems like a big piece of the pie that we're potentially missing here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we can pull Frankie in for the official answer on that, but I do know that James Fortner, who is the Washington Office Cooperative Fire folk, I know he's working to get some of those layers built in. Frankie, do you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, not an answer to that one, Brian, but it's certainly something that will continue to be talked about. And you know, I'd be curious if within your region, if you guys have brought that up with your state foresters and seen what their, you know, it would be a workload that we would be asking the state foresters and state organizations to assume. And so we'd want to have that conversation with them about, you know, here's the value of it. You know, what's your perspective? So I know we're continuing to talk about it from the co-op fire side of things. And if we provide money, then we expect some data in return. That's part of the conversation. But yeah, I would be curious what you guys hear from your state partners on if they see it and value it the same.
I guess, Frankie, I'll just jump in real quick and say, yeah, we've talked about it conceptually. I think they value the importance of this to kind of paint that picture. And I think a lot of our states, you know, struggle with their own databases, just tracking spatially their treatments. And so that's obviously a piece of it, but their ability or capacity to also do something like FTEM, I think they would very much prefer to tap into an existing system and database. It would make life a lot easier for them. So I think they conversations we've had here specifically in Region 2, I think there's some value, but yeah, it would be a workload, but I'm certainly an advocate. If we're pushing all this money out, there's got to be those expectations. There's got to be some, you know, some benefits to that to help continue the money flowing, I guess. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
So it looks like we got time for one more question, and I'll go to Robin, but just a heads up. So when we're done with this session here, I'll end the recording. And then for anyone who wants to linger around, I'm more than willing to kind of have an ad hoc informal session on the Fuels community of practice, the navigation and or stuff that's available, or if folks want to see more stuff or different stuff. That's the whole purpose here, is to help improve that site for you. So Robin, your question?
Well, mine is a follow-up to Brian. We struggle with the Stephen funding projects, non-fed, of whether we should capture that data or not. And I've just been saying, because we have so many interactions on our own land, I've been saying, no, skip it. But I don't know if that's the correct answer.
In terms of Stevens funding, Robin, that's a question that, you know, I know James Fortner, again, he's the state rep on that side of stuff for us at the federal level. That's stuff that we are, I know, considering or including. I know you can do it in facts. You can get some credit for those interagency treatments, but that's definitely a good follow-up question we need to probably address and or give a better direction on. I'll chase that down for you. Alrighty. Well, hey, this is great. This is the first session. You know, they're going to become hopefully more interactive and bring your questions. That's the whole intent of this. It's not to just be a show and tell. It's supposed to be an interactive. You bring your questions, concerns, and comments. I look forward to the participation in our future sessions. And again, if you have more stuff that you want to see or questions burning in your bridges, then shoot them to me by email and feel free. Other than that, we'll cut loose, and then I'll shift over to the shop around on the community practice. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jen.